The cell was cold, but not as cold as the silence, and not as cruel as the watchers behind the glass. She hadn't spoken in days. The chains around her arms weren't meant to hold beasts, they were meant to humiliate her. Her name was Kelra, last of the Flamebinders, and for 10 days, she hadn't eaten, hadn't stood, hadn't fought back, not because she was broken, but because no one cared. The guards outside laughed. Some even placed bets on how long she would last before crawling. Like an animal in begging. She never did. Her eyes burned red with silent fire, but even flames could fade in solitude. She stared at the floor, not in defeat but in waiting. She was waiting for someone. Anyone. In another part of the facility, the new prisoner had just arrived, a human male. Dirty, limping, bruised, but alive. His name was Jace. The guards didn't even bother chaining him. After all, what could one human do in a world ruled by chains and cruelty? He was thrown into the cell next to hers, with a clang that echoed like thunder in the stone hallway. Kelra didn't turn her head, but her fingers twitched. A new scent in the air. Not alien, not cruel, not like them. Something else. Something warm. Something alive. Jace groaned as he sat up, leaning against the wall. He looked around with bloodied eyes, then froze when he saw her. She was chained to the center of the cell like an animal. Her body was starved, her back scarred, her hair tangled. But her eyes, those eyes burned with something fierce. He didn't speak, not yet. But he saw it, the wrongness, the injustice. He had seen a lot in the outer colonies, but this was something different. This was personal. On the second day, Jace watched as the guards brought food. They tossed a metal tray into his cell, but for her, they only offered scraps, dropped just out of reach. She didn't beg. She didn't crawl. She simply turned her head away. Jace pushed his tray aside. He waited for the guard to leave. When the footsteps faded, he stood slowly, wincing with each breath. He examined the gap between their cells. It was narrow, barred, electrified, but there was space. And his tray had handles. Metal ones. By the third day, he had bruises from trying. He didn't know why he cared. Maybe because he had once watched his own sister cry behind a locked door while no one came. Maybe because suffering in silence was something no soul should carry alone. Or maybe because when she finally whispered, "Why do you look at me like that?" His heart broke a little. "Because they forgot you were a person," he said. But I didn't. On the fifth night, a storm raged outside. Thunder shook the complex. Power flickered. And in that chaos, Jace found his chance. The guards were distracted. One of the electrified bars shorted out. Just for a second, he didn't hesitate. He slipped the tray through the gap. He broke his nails, loosening the bolt. He cut his hand on exposed metal. But finally, he passed a piece of real food through the opening. Kelra didn't take it at first. Her pride screamed not to. But her eyes glistened with something softer than rage. He smiled at her. Not like the guards did. Not like the monsters who watched her suffer. But like someone who remembered what kindness was. What it meant to help without asking anything in return. That night, she spoke more than one word. She asked his name. He told her. She asked why he was there. He shrugged and said, "Wrong place, wrong heart." By day 10, the guards had grown. Bored, they planned to remove her, maybe use her for training, maybe worse. But that morning, the head jailer came to inspect the human. And what he found made him stop in his tracks. The human was gone. Only the chains were left behind. And on the floor of the chained girl's cell was a key covered in human blood. Asterisk rain fell hard across the metal roof of the prison tower, drowning out the soft creak of movement below. The guards were yelling. Doors slammed open. Orders barked. But in the heart of the underground block, silence had settled like fog. Kelra stared at the key lying on the cold floor, her breath shallow, her arms still trembling from weakness. She hadn't moved yet, but her heart was thundering in her chest. Jace was gone. No trace of his body, no sign of struggle. Just blood on the bars, and the key he must have stolen and bled for. Her fingers shook as she reached for it. It took all her strength just to lift her arm. The shackle around her wrist had eaten into her skin. She gritted her teeth and shoved the key in slowly, unsure if it would even turn. It clicked out for the first time in 10 days. Kalra's right hand was free. It felt strange, too light, almost alien. Her left hand took longer. The chain on her ankle had rusted into place. She hissed as she twisted, the metal biting deep. But when it snapped open, she collapsed to the ground and gasped, not from pain, but from something she had forgotten the name of. Freedom, upstairs, alarms blared. Lights flickered red. Guards were storming the levels, searching every cell. But they didn't think the weak girl would be the one to escape. After all, no one had ever helped her before. No one but the human, who was willing to bleed. Kalra wrapped part of her torn robe around her wrist and stood. Her legs wobbled. Her balance was gone. She had lost weight, lost strength, but not will. Jace had passed through the vent above her ceiling. The grate hung crooked. He must have used something sharp, probably from the food tray. He had climbed alone in the dark, probably injured. And he had left her the path. She forced herself up. Crawled first, then walked. She gripped the wall, gasping with each step, but she didn't stop, not now. She reached the corner where he had slipped through. The opening was narrow, lined with sharp wire. She didn't hesitate. She pulled herself up, tearing her elbow and side open. Blood smeared the edge. Her breath rasped in her throat. But she pushed forward. The tunnel was dark and damp. Water dripped from pipes. The air stank of mold and metal. But every few feet she saw signs, smudges on the wall, scratches from fingernails, and once, a strip of human cloth. She closed her hand around it and pressed it to her chest. Jace had gone this way. That was all she needed to know. 2 levels above, a technician noticed a camera feed go dead. Another reported a temperature spike near one of the air filters. The commander dismissed it. Just a rat, he said. He had no idea what kind of fire was now crawling through the heart of his prison. Kalra emerged into a long maintenance shaft. She had never seen this place before, but Jace had. He must have mapped it out in his mind. She followed the trail. Blood drops here. Fingerprint on a pipe there. A torn piece of boot sole wedged in a vent. The final door was locked, heavy, electronic. A panel blinked red. She touched it. It buzzed and hissed, rejecting her DNA. Of course it did. She wasn't registered as alive in their system anymore. Not since the day they chained her like a thing. But Jace had left one more gift. Just beside the panel, hidden under a pipe, was a chipped power core. Dead to the guards, but to her just enough energy. Her flames, once dormant, sparked from her fingertips. She pressed her hand against the wall. Fire spread like veins through the wires. The lock melted in place, and the door slid open with a broken groan. And there he was. Jace lay crumpled on the floor, breathing shallow, his shirt soaked in blood. He had made it to the outer corridor, but collapsed before he could open the final blast gate. His hand still gripped the override lever. Kalra dropped beside him. Her hands trembled as she checked his pulse. It was there. Weak, but real. She looked at the lever, then back to him. Then she did something she hadn't done in years. She whispered a vow, kissed his forehead, and pulled the lever herself. The blast door opened into the wind and rain of freedom, and the prisoner no one believed in carried the man who had set her free into the storm. The rain hit Kiora like knives, cold, sharp, and endless. But she didn't stop. Her bare feet splashed through mud as she carried Jace across the ruins outside the prison. His body was heavy, limp against her shoulder, but she held him like Something sacred, not a prisoner, not a stranger, but the one soul who saw her as more than a chained thing. Behind her, the alarm screamed into the night. Guards shouted from the tower. Bright lights swept across the fields like search hounds, but she was already in the trees. The branches scratched her skin, the roots clawed at her steps. But the shadows embraced her, hiding her where metal could. She didn't know where she was going. Only that she had to keep moving. Every breath Jace took was shallow, strained. His blood stained her arms. She pressed her palm against his ribs, trying to keep pressure. Her flame sparked once, but it flickered out. Too weak. She needed time, a place to rest. Hours passed before she found it. An old storage bunker, long buried under vines and moss. A forgotten relic from the last war. She kicked the hatch open and dragged him inside. It smelled of rust and dust, but it was safe, dry, hidden. She laid Jace down on a soft patch of cloth and covered him with her own tattered robe. His eyes fluttered open. Only for a second. He looked at her face, tried to speak, but only a rasp escaped. She shushed him gently. "You saved me," she whispered. "Now let me return it." She explored the bunker by touch, found a cracked emergency kit, still sealed. Inside was old antiseptic, worn bandages, a single injector of biofoam. She cleaned his wounds, wrapped him slowly. Each wrap pulled tighter around her heart. He had risked everything for someone the galaxy had forgotten. As he slept, Kalra finally looked at her own arms, bruised, cut. Her body screamed for rest, but her mind was sharp now, awake. She remembered the Chainmaster's face. She remembered the first whip, the laughter from the guard when she begged for water. And she remembered Jace's voice when he said she was still a person. That memory was fire. It grew in her chest, not wild, not reckless, but steady. She could feel her inner flame again, not just the one they feared, but the one they tried to smother. The flame that made her Kalra of the Flamebinders. The next morning, she heard boots in the distance. The guards were searching the outer zones. They had vehicles now, drones. They were angry, not because a prisoner had escaped, but because a human had made fools of them. Kalra knew she couldn't run anymore. Not with Jace, not like this. They would be found. Captured again. Maybe worse. She looked down at him, his hand resting gently beside hers. He had given her a chance. Now she had to decide what to do with it. She kissed his hand and stood, her legs steadier now, her breath controlled. The flame inside her rose like a tide. She pulled back her hair, cleaned her cuts with what was left. Then she found a broken shard of glass and etched one word into the bunker wall. Alive. And then she walked out the door, barefoot in the dirt, eyes burning like twin suns. She didn't hide. She walked straight into the path of the search team, not as prey, but as the storm they never saw coming, because for 10 days, they had broken her body. But it had taken a human's kindness to remind her that her soul was never theirs to chain. Asterisk, the first guard who saw her froze in place. He expected a half-dead creature crawling through the dirt. Instead, Kalra walked upright, wrapped in fire and silence. Her arms were bare, her hair wild from the storm. Her eyes glowing like coals pulled from a dying star. Target located. The soldier screamed into his cum, raising his weapon. But his voice shook. Something about her made his training feel useless. Something in her face reminded him of old battle paintings, the ones where legends stood alone against armies. She didn't stop. She raised her hand slowly. Flames wrapped around her fingers like ribbons, not wild but controlled. Not lashing out, but warning. The air shimmered. The ground hissed under her steps. The guard took one more look and backed away without firing. But more came. 3 transports dropped from the sky. Elite units in black armor surrounded the field. Drones flew overhead, scanning her body. The system flagged her as severely weakened, no threat, low priority. They didn't see what Jace saw. They didn't feel the fire in her blood. She closed her eyes and let the memories return. The whips, the laughter, the hunger. The moment she nearly gave up. And then, the human face lit only by flickering sparks, holding out food and hope. Her fire exploded outward like a pulse, knocking back the nearest soldiers without even touching them. They panicked, half-raised shields, half-open fire. Bolts of blue light raced toward her, but the flames bent around her body like armor. She didn't flinch. She didn't run. Her footsteps were steady. Each blast that struck her fire sent out a burst of light and heat, melting weapons and cracking visors. A commander shouted orders, demanding she be subdued. Net launchers fired. Chains designed for larger beasts soared toward her. She lifted her arm, and a wave of fire snapped them mid-air. Her power was back, but it wasn't wild anymore. It was focused, sharpened by pain, forged by kindness. Then they brought in the walker, a towering machine with cannons on each side. Its steps made the ground tremble. The hatch opened, revealing the warden himself, the one who had ordered her suffering, the one who had told the guards to chain her for fun. He smirked behind thick armor. "You should have stayed in chains," he called down. "Now I'll burn the last of your kind myself." Kelra didn't speak. She raised her hand. The flames danced upward. The trees caught first, the ground cracked second. Then the walker's outer layer began to steam. The warden ordered full power. He screamed into his controls. But nothing came from the guns. The heat had already melted the firing systems. The metal turned red, then white. The cockpit glass shattered. The warden's scream echoed as the walker collapsed on its knees. But Kelra didn't kill him, not yet. She walked past him. She didn't need revenge. She needed them to see, to remember, to understand that no chain could hold a soul set free. One soldier dropped his weapon, then another. The third fell to his knees and whispered, "We were wrong." Kelra finally stopped walking. Her fire cooled, though her skin still glowed. With heat, she looked around at the men who had mocked her. She didn't need their fear. She didn't need their praise. She only needed one thing now, to return to the one who reminded her she was worth saving. And so, without a word, she turned her back to the burning field and walked toward the bunker where Jace waited to open his eyes. The rain had slowed to a whisper when Kelra returned to the bunker. Smoke still clung to her hair. Her body was covered in dirt, dried blood, and soot, but her hands no longer shook. Her steps no longer dragged. She was no longer just the girl they had chained. She knelt beside Jace, who still lay pale and weak on the bedding of cloth. His skin was cold, his lips dry. She rested her hand on his cheek and whispered his name. At first, nothing. Then his eyes twitched. Slowly they opened. His gaze searched the dim room, confused, unfocused. Until they found her. She smiled, tired, soft, but real. His lips moved. She leaned in closer. His voice cracked as he asked, "Are you all right?" She laughed gently, the sound surprising even her. After everything, his first words were about her. She wiped the dirt from his brow and nodded. "They're gone," she said. "You gave me strength. I gave them fire." He tried to sit up, wincing, but she stopped him. "You don't need to move yet," she said. "Just rest. You've done enough. You brought back someone the galaxy left behind." Jace reached for her hand, gripping it with surprising force. "I didn't save you," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "You were never broken. I just reminded you who you are." Kelra looked away, tears threatening to rise, not from pain, but from the unfamiliar weight of kindness. From the strange feeling blooming in her chest. She had survived wars, cruelty, even starvation. But no one had ever looked at her the way he did now. As Jace rested, she left for a moment to gather supplies. The bunker had a water tank in the back, cracked but usable. She found enough to wash his wounds again, even helped him drink. Slowly, his breathing grew steady. His body stopped trembling. And by evening, he was sleeping peacefully. That night, Kelra sat beside him, watching the sky through a hole in the bunker ceiling. Stars blinked beyond the clouds. For the first time in years, she didn't feel hunted. Didn't feel cursed. She felt seen. She felt chosen. And not because of her power, but because of the man lying beside her. In the distance, the fires from the prison still burned. The guards who had escaped fled into the wilds. No one would return to this place soon. They were afraid, and rightly so. The girl they had caged now walked with fire in her heart and a purpose in her steps, but Kelra had no interest in revenge. Only one thing mattered now, Jace: his warmth, his kindness, his voice that reminded her she was more than what they tried to make her. She had something rare now, something fragile, but precious. A future. Morning came slowly, painting gold across the bunker's broken ceiling. Jace stirred as the sunlight reached his face. His body still ached, but it no longer screamed. He felt the warmth beside him before he even opened his eyes. Kelra was already awake, sitting cross-legged, her back straight, her eyes closed. She was meditating, but not to hide. To heal. He watched her quietly, breathing slow and steady. The fire inside her didn't rage anymore. It pulsed gently beneath her skin, not as a weapon, but as part of her. She was no longer the girl they had chained. She was something new now, reborn, and he had been there to witness it. "You're watching me," she said without opening her eyes. Her voice was calm, confident, light. "I've never seen anyone glow when they breathe," he replied with a faint smile. "Didn't want to miss it?" She opened her eyes and turned to him. "You almost died," she said. "You gave everything. Why?" Jace didn't answer right away. He pushed himself up on his elbow and looked at her face. The scars, the tiredness, the strength. "Because the world doesn't need another soldier," he said. "It needs someone to remind it what mercy looks like. You were in chains, but I saw your soul was already free." Kelra blinked slowly. Her heart felt heavier now, but not in pain. It was full. She reached forward and took his hand. "They broke my body," she said. "But they forgot something. Fire can be buried. It can be dimmed. But it always finds air again." They stayed like that for a while, no words. Just warmth between their fingers, and the silence of a world that no longer hunted them. Later that day, they left the bunker. Kelra wore armor she had forged from scrap and flame. It was simple, functional, but hers. Jace leaned on a carved staff she had made for him, shaped from the very trees where she once hid. They walked side by side through the forest, toward a new place. A quiet colony Jace once heard about. A place where names didn't come with chains. Of what happened spread faster than either of them expected. Some said the Flamebinder girl had burned an entire prison into the soil. Others said she melted a war machine with just a glance. But only a few knew the real truth. That she didn't destroy the guards out of revenge. She walked through fire for a human who treated her like a person. Whispers grew. Some feared her. Some worshipped her. But Kelra didn't care. She had no interest in thrones or war or legends. She only wanted space to breathe, to heal, to choose her own path. And she had someone beside her now who would never try to control that path. One night, under a sky full of stars, Kelra looked at Jace and asked softly, "What will you do when you're strong again?" He smiled. "I'll follow you," he sighed. "Wherever your fire leads." And she kissed him, not with heat, but with the quiet grace of someone finally unchained from her past. In the end, they didn't just escape the prison. They escaped the roles the galaxy forced on them. And the chains? They were never hers to begin with.